What I'd like to do first is to present the 4 reasons for why the confrontation in Yemen between the terrorist networks, the 2 kinds of terrorist networks, and Yemeni forces, why this confrontation is relevant to actually U.S. national security in addition to the other aspects of it. First of all, because Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, that is Al-Qaeda in Yemen, has been and is launching attacks against the U.S. Homeland Security, organizing cells, recruiting elements, both from within Yemen, from other parts of the world, and trying to insert them, to have them penetrate our country. In addition to that, as we have seen over the past years, an attempt to radicalize, indoctrinate, recruit, and mobilize elements within the United States, not just sending them through, as was the case with Abdul Muttalib, for example, who most likely, and we will wait, of course, for the full investigation, but most likely we can project that he has been radicalized or pushed to be radicalized by Imam Awlaki operating out of Yemen. Another example that also is important to think about is the exchange of emails between, again, Imam al-Awlaki, who's based in Yemen, and Major Nidal Hassan, who has perpetrated the terror act in Fort Hood, the massacre. Previously, I remind you that a number of Jihadi Yemenis have been apprehended years ago, trying to establish a cell in New York, the Lakwana case. So, for that reason alone, the hub that Al-Qaeda has already established in Yemen, geographically, is targeting the homeland. And that, therefore, needs to bring our attention to the Al-Qaeda operation against the U.S. out of Yemen. 2, Al-Qaeda in Yemen, as I will detail later, targets, if successful, if strategically successful, targets what I call a economic security of the United States and of the West, and I would even widen it to call it of the international community. If the Al-Qaeda operation in Yemen is successful, or would be successful, and it's very important in terms of, sure, national security expertise, to project, not just to react to what is the state today, it's to project into the future, and the future can come very quick. If Al-Qaeda is successful in establishing its bases in Yemen, then keep in mind that one of the most important highway of the seas from the Gulf to the Red Sea, the oil reserves that we get in the West in general, America in particular, goes through that part. And Yemen has hundreds of miles of coastlines, the south and on the Red Sea, that could serve, if Al-Qaeda is successful, as launching bases for attacks against those ships. We've seen how the other side of the Red Sea in Somalia, how with some very little and light equipment, the so-called pirates have been able to create headache for many navies. Just imagine and project what would be the case in terms of the security of the ships and shipping from the Gulf to the Red Sea if Al-Qaeda is successful in Yemen. 3, in addition to that, Al-Qaeda in Yemen, if successful, can not just impact the country of Yemen. That country has hundreds of miles of borders with Saudi Arabia. And those borders are very close to very important areas in Saudi Arabia, namely Hijaz province. And the Hijaz province is where the most important 2 shrines in the Islamic world are, Mecca and Medina. Al-Qaeda is eyeing this. And the capacity of our analysis to go as far as Al-Qaeda wants to see would give us some sort of advantage when we want to devise our policies. 4, and last, there is the other threat in Yemen. Al-Qaeda is one. The other one is Iran. And Iran's intervention, according to statements made by Yemeni officials, by other Arabian officials, collection of think tanks, and of course our government in a very shy way, Iran's intervention in northern Yemen in support of the Houthi rebellion is also to be taken into account. And again, I would always emphasize the projection. What is it that the Iranian regime wants to accomplish on the shores of the Red Sea will basically affect us and affect directly our national security. So for these four very heavy reasons, the confrontation in Yemen between the jihadi forces and the government are very relevant, directly relevant to our national security. The point here is to try to understand, read into the events, analyze them, and respond to them. And this is a first challenge before getting to the actual understanding of the facts. We are submitted, when I say we, meaning those who are engaged in the public debate in America and in the West and in the international community, we are submitted to what I have called in some of my books a derailment of analysis, meaning a number of arguments are put into the debates about Yemen or about Iraq or Afghanistan or other parts, just to deviate us from what is the center of the analysis. I'll give you a few examples. In the discussions about Yemen, including in the London conference yesterday, before and I'm sure in the future, you have three elements that are always pushed forward. One is that the economic situation in Yemen. Certainly, the Yemeni economic situation is not perfect. Actually, it's very weak. The literacy level is skyrocketing. No doubt about that. But fixing or trying to fix the economy of Yemen is not the response to the security jihadi threat that we are facing. It's a mathematical equation that we have to be very attentive to. When the arguments in a war of ideas push us to go into one direction, it means to have less attention to the real fight against Al-Qaeda or the jihadi ideology by sending us trying to fix the economy of the entire country of Yemen or of the entire international community. Number one. Number two, the corruption. There is no doubt about it. There is corruption in Yemen, and there is corruption in 150 other countries around the world. But trying to fix the corruption in Yemen is not going to give us results immediately with regard to the national security, with regard to Al-Qaeda. That is not to say that we should not, but that is to say where are the priorities and how we should fight them. C, frustration with foreign policy. That's the traditional argument which is advanced always by the, I call them the jihadi lobbies, that, well, it's because of our policy. We correct our policy, let's say, with regard to the Arab-Israeli conflict, and things will be fixed in Yemen. Wrong. That's an argument pushed against us by the other side on purpose. And I had many times the opportunity to be in Arab media or on Arab TV and counter-challenging this argument. And I could share with you the very simple way to do it by telling your panel, okay, let's suppose that Israel withdraws from all the territories. Israel withdraws from the Middle East entirely. So what happened next? Just what happened next? And usually you get a very long silence of 30 seconds. They wouldn't be able to tell you what happened next. Will the genocide in Darfur stop? Will Al-Qaeda just become the social democratic party? Will the Khomeinists elect a secular woman as a prime minister? Of course not. So this Arab-Israeli conflict argument that is always pushed onto the debate is to block us from actually going to the roots of the issue. Now, if I want to divide the type of threat, I would say we need to look at two directions. One is the Al-Qaeda Salafi network. Al-Qaeda being the tip of the iceberg, the Salafi pyramid is much wider than Al-Qaeda. It is actually the pool from which Al-Qaeda recruits its elements, including in Yemen. And of course, the other side of the jihadi web, the Iranian Khomeinist recruitment that is happening in northern Yemen. Now, quickly, let's look at the evolution of that threat in Yemen, how it did happen in less than a couple of minutes. The Salafi web, the Islamic fundamentalist Salafi web, that has produced Al-Qaeda. It's not the other way around. It's not that Al-Qaeda has produced the Salafists have produced Al-Qaeda. And that's an important statement applied to Yemen and to other countries. So even if we defeat Al-Qaeda, we're not over yet. I know it's very difficult to digest. Al-Qaeda is a byproduct of an ideology, of a network. That network had different names and different functions. In the 20s and 30s, it was Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, Muslim Brotherhood. In various places in the Middle East, it took different names depending on the national identities. In Sudan, NIF, National Islamic Front. In Algeria, FIS, Front Islamique de Salut. And then the offshoots, and then the offshoots. So it is very important in our analysis when we look at the long-term confrontation with Al-Qaeda to understand that there is a feeding network that brings the recruits to Al-Qaeda. So the history of the Salafi network in Yemen is 80 years old. 80 years old, like most Salafists around the region. What does that mean? It means when we sit down in London or in Washington or anywhere else in the world and we want to fix things in Yemen or confront Al-Qaeda, what has been produced via 80 years of deep work, 3-4 generations of Salafists, you cannot reverse in 80 days or in 80 weeks. It's a very long-term fight. The fight to counter and defeat the network that produces Al-Qaeda, that produces the recruits for Al-Qaeda, needs a whole different strategy, not just a military strategy. It needs also a set of political, ideological, educational issues to look at. In Yemen as well, what makes Yemen different from other places is an internal struggle between the North and the South. The South being more secular, to put it in a very quick and summarized way, and the North has been more tribal, and we would call it conservative in the sense of Yemeni politics. And as we all know, in the mid-90s, there was a merge of the two countries. The merge of both countries did not really satisfy the elites, the political elites in the South. So that's a pretty domestic Yemeni issue. And it will have to be solved from the perspective of political dialogue, probably with some sort of intervention from the Arab League or the international community. But that is not the issue of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda uses this issue. Al-Qaeda began its operations in Yemen in the 90s already. We saw one of the major operations conducted from Yemen against a U.S. asset was in 2000, as we all know, the call. Al-Qaeda in Yemen has been able to recruit and send individuals, foot soldiers for Al-Qaeda around the world. So it's not just a Yemeni operation, it's an international operation. On the other hand, the president of Unified Yemen, Ali Abdullah Saleh, as was the case in Pakistan, it's always good to compare, was very late in engaging Al-Qaeda. And the price being paid today by the Yemeni government, by Sana'a, by the capital, and by the regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh, is in fact proportional to the time spent not confronting Al-Qaeda. So here you have it. Pakistan had the same situation. If you spend, let's say, 3-4 years thinking that you're going to cut a deal at some point or it's going to just go away, well, when the Al-Qaeda and Taliban in Pakistan and the jihadists in Yemen decide to move against you, then you are surprised how strong they are, how vast their networks are. It's almost a mathematical equation. Give time, they will grow. Begin the confrontation earlier, of course, they're going to be shrinking. So up till the early 2009, Al-Qaeda was not really waging major operations inside Yemen. Some among us in Washington or in Brussels would think that, because they were not able to do it. In fact, no. In fact, it was a decision by Al-Qaeda to specifically begin their action when they analyzed that there is a positive environment for them to move. What would that mean to me? It means that if the jihadi network is growing and it's not engaging in multiple actions, it is because of a choice. Meaning they have analyzed the fact that it is much better to grow, to use that base to feed other bases around the world, until the country where you are operating in will begin limping, will begin going down. So the analysis of Al-Qaeda was that when Iran came and fed the rebellion of the Houthis in the north, when the South started to activate its rebellion or its secession against the north, and there is something else which I will talk about at the very end of my remark, when they analyzed that the international context was favorable, and you may guess why, because of US policy, then they moved in. It's almost a scientific equation whereby you could even predict, at least project, that Al-Qaeda would analyze that the time is favorable to move when they see that the international, regional, and local conditions are met. Now, as of 2008, there is a convergence of interests between, on the one hand, the escalation by Al-Qaeda in Yemen and the escalation by the pro-Iranian militia of the Houthis in northern Yemen. It's very clear. They both started almost at the same time. Now, and that's the point, their perception of the capacity of the Yemeni government to respond, of the capacity of the other Arab governments to respond, and more important, the capacity of the US government to respond, encouraged them to engage simultaneously at the same time and weakening the Yemeni government at the same time. So it is not just few frustrated people who are poor in Yemen who just rose, and then few other frustrated and poor people in the northern part of Yemen who rose. That's a very naive, that's strategically naive. And that's unfortunately the meat of our international debate. We think that frustration is just unleashed. It is much more organized and strategic than what we think. So, what are these strategic goals, if we want to summarize them? For Al-Qaeda, and I am really summarizing here. For Al-Qaeda, it's first of all to establish enclaves within Yemen. They want their Waziristans within Yemen. That's goal number one. So they are fighting Yemeni forces to the point where the government would say, okay, if you want to have a safe haven in this part, you can stay here, but don't get closer to our decision centers. That's the game. Unfortunately, we have a poor reading from afar of what is it that Al-Qaeda want. They want a Waziristan in Yemen to begin with. Second, once they would secure those enclaves, then the next one, the next goal, is to reach the coasts of Yemen. Currently, they are operating in the hinterland of the country. But if you look at the map, you will see that there are two directions where Al-Qaeda is going to go to. One towards the Red Sea, the coast on the Red Sea, and the other one, the coast on the ocean, the Indian Ocean. And any military strategist will tell you what that means. It means if they can reach the coast, basically, they can mount maritime operations. And if they can mount maritime operations, then this whole umbilical line linking the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea will be under threat by Al-Qaeda operations. And that means a lot. Now, is this only projection? It is projection, but it's also a collection of a variety of speeches and chat rooms and other analysis put together. Now, the art is to be able to put it together. And that was over 5 to 6 years of monitoring, of constant analysis of the Al-Qaeda perception of why Yemen is important to them. Third goal of Al-Qaeda is basically the interland, the peninsula interland. Their real goal is Saudi Arabia. The name of the organization is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And the Arabian Peninsula includes mostly Saudi Arabia. And I don't need to project why Saudi Arabia is important to Al-Qaeda. I mean, that is something very simple to understand. That is the heart, the beating heart of the Muslim world in terms of Mecca and Medina. And there is also the oil factor. Iran's series of goals in Yemen. The Iranian leadership also would like to secure an enclave in Sa'da. Sa'da is the province in northern Yemen, which has a Shia majority, where the militia of the Houthis are basically in control so far, which is a province in between the areas controlled by the Yemeni government and Saudi Arabia. Now, the Saudis began to engage them, militarily speaking, and the Yemenis as well. The Iranians will basically do everything they can so that this enclave is established, meaning they would widen the fighting and then sign a ceasefire agreement. That's the method. You escalate, and then everybody would measure, should we continue the escalation? And some third country will move in. I'd say Qatar. How about Qatar? They're the experts in moving in, the good cop. So the bad cop is Iran, and then Qatar comes and say, okay, I could settle that. We've seen it in Lebanon. We've seen it in May 2008, when Hezbollah invaded West Beirut and tried to go to the mountain. And then everybody didn't know where to stop Hezbollah. And Qatar said, okay, I know. I could do a mediation. And they invited both the March 14 coalition of Lebanon and Hezbollah. And it ended up with Hezbollah controlling the airport of Beirut, Hezbollah controlling half of the government, so on and so forth. Take always from the past examples and then project them. Maybe in a year from now, we'll meet again, and we'll see that Qatar is sitting trying to negotiate between the Houthis and the Yemenis and the Saudis. So first is to create those enclaves. Second, again, the goal of the Iranian-supported enclave in Yemen is to reach the waters. And in this case, you could look at the map and see that it is the Red Sea. So that far in the analysis, are we seeing an Iranian expansion attempt to expand in the Red Sea area? Of course. We are even late in the analysis. Don't we know that Eritrea already has extended facilities to the Iranian Navy, and that there are Iranian units and submarines that are visiting Eritrea from time to time? You've got to connect those dots. We're barely able to connect the dots of Al-Qaeda. Now we have the Iranian situation. And of course, Iran has a great interest in inflaming the situation inside the peninsula. So with this in mind, what could be guidelines, suggested guidelines for US policy? I find that there are 5 areas where the US administration, if it's convinced, of course, and the US Congress support, 5 areas where US policy could counter these 2 strategies. And again, probably the last time I want to make a statement about it in these remarks, let's go way beyond what the other side want us to discuss, the arguments about the social frustration and economics and development of Yemen. Of course, that is part of it. But let's go really to the issue of strategic response. 1, no doubt about it, counterterrorism training to Yemeni armed forces. There is no doubt about it. We need to do that, but it has to be conditioned. And that's very important when it's discussed in Congress and with the administration, to make sure that with that influx of training and funding, we need also, and I bring number 2, counter-radicalization. One should go with the other. We're not going to be training an authoritarian government to do counterterrorism. So when they want to strike a deal at some point, they'll just strike the deal and get this experience and technology from us. No. You want support in counterterrorism, you're going to also have counter-radicalization programs, which we would like to take a look at and be with you, helping you in terms of counter-radicalization, meaning counter-ideology. 3, it would be advisable if the US government and our allies in the region, it doesn't matter how many allies in the region, you pick Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Arabian Peninsula, the other Gulf states, that's fine, should help Yemen in engaging, the Yemeni government, in engaging in a dialogue with the South. Because this is where the problem is. If Yemen goes into a civil war or any sort of civil unrest, nothing can stop Al-Qaeda, nothing can stop Iran. Because practically we won't be able to do much. It will become a collection of entities. So this North-South dialogue, and it is to our advantage, because in the South you have secular people, and in the North you have people who are fighting Al-Qaeda. It's unreasonable that they are fighting against each other politically. So if we have diplomatic skills, this is the area where it should be proven. 4, important, regional security. The United States is always called everywhere around the world to do the job, the entire job. It is very important in this case, because it's about Yemen, that the Saudi Arabians, the Gulf states, or the Arab countries with whom we have military relations, we are training, we are sending the best of our weapons, that they should have a regional system, and that regional system would be in the front line of the fight against Al-Qaeda. Because what happens is that we go to fight against Al-Qaeda, and most of our allies, and I've seen it in Arab media debate, they say, oh, we'd better solve it, otherwise, the bad guy is going to come and fight. I mean, we are put in a framework that we are the bad guys, America is the bad guys, by our own allies. No. You're going to be in the front lines. You're going to be fighting Al-Qaeda. You're going to be containing Iran. And we and our partners in the international community should be supporting you. And last, number 5, the finances. There are a lot of wealth in the Arabian Peninsula. When we talk about a package to Yemen, I'd strongly suggest that that package, 80% of that package should come from the Arabian Peninsula. They just opened or just finished the construction of the highest tower in Dubai, the highest tower in wealth versus the lowest tower in poverty in Yemen. So Arab money, petrodollars, should be the first one to be invested in Yemen, not American dollars taken from our middle class here. The very rich regimes that could solve the problem, not just in Yemen, could solve it in Gaza if they really wanted, should be the first petrodollars to be invested in Yemen. And that is something I hope will be included in the discussions between the US and Yemen. And last, of course, the homeland security threat that we have with regard to Yemen. I'm just going to project that because of the cases that we saw, the samples of Abdul Muttalib and Major Hassan, and I'll be more than happy to discuss that, it is my assumption and projection that the base of operation in Yemen has already inserted within the United States more and much wider than basically projected, because we're talking about 8 years, 8 to 9 years of operation. So we need to be looking into this as well as a potential second or third wave by Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and therefore enhance our capacities here in homeland security. And again, as we're going to ask the Yemenis to do, we'd better begin doing counter-radicalization, counter-ideology. So there is a memo that has been issued last summer by the administration that has to be revised. And that memo is about what words do you use, what words do you don't use. Well, it is time now to use the right words so our analysts can be able to detect the jihadists, those coming from Yemen, and those who have been groomed and raised here among us. Thank you very much. Arab armies that are fighting Al-Qaeda, Arab armies which are receiving very sophisticated weapon systems from us directly, and in addition to that, training, not just the, I have met many Arab officers here in Tampa and in Washington and elsewhere, and they have been taking seminars and they have been doing joint training. This is the time, this is their battlefield. Now the question, will they be successful in the long term? I'll answer that question after they engage, not before they engage. We would like to see, for example, the Saudis and the Yemenis and the others in the region, focusing on a real fight against Al-Qaeda and the Iranian influence. The Saudis have done so, tried to do so in a very limited way. When the Houthis, the pro-Iranians, actually crossed into Saudi territory. And that was red line for them. That was DEFCON 1. And then they engaged. What is important probably is not just the regular armies, because Al-Qaeda threat is not against the regular armies. It's the special forces of all these Arab forces or Arab governments. Yes, the Egyptians, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Moroccans. One of my recommendations is that they should actually form an international Arab body to fight Al-Qaeda. In as much as we are spending time and lives and blood, they should do the same. Now, they're going to tell you where there are political considerations. Well, it's their job to address these political considerations. And I would I'd take advantage of your question to say, not only their special forces, their media. They should be fighting the war of ideas in the way we want to fight it. And they could do it probably not better than us, but as much as we can. And that's the challenge, that when we sit down with them, that's the moment of truth. We know, are you actually fighting for your own national security or not?
And help.
Well, the Saudi perception of the threat has two levels. The level of understanding of what it is, the real level, and the level of expressing what it is. Expressing what it is, that is in the media, statements made by governments. At that level, they are not expressing as much as they really feel and know, because they consider that would be an escalation. They are basically afraid of Iran. The priority in Saudi Arabia is more so towards Iran than towards Al-Qaeda, because they believe that they can fight Al-Qaeda. That's what they believe. They believe eventually they can fight Al-Qaeda. But Iran is coming from all sides. Iran is on their south in Sada. Iran is in Eritrea. Iran is across from the Gulf. When we will withdraw from Iraq? I mean, this is something not even debated here, and the Saudis, knows about that. They feel that Iranian influence will thrust through central and southern Iraq and will have a 200 to 300 miles borders with them. They're preparing for what is to come. In addition, and I add, everybody in Saudi would know that when Iran would decide, it could begin the incitement within the eastern part of Saudi Arabia, which has a Shia majority. So the fight in Arabia against Iran is really a fight for survival, let alone national security. Are they expressing it that way? their belief is that it is not yet the time. But at some point in time, obviously, media close to the Saudis do some sort of criticism. But as you just said, they would always rather see the United States doing the job for them. But my call here in this conference is to begin pushing the Arabs, and in particular the Saudis, to go to the front lines. I don't have the exact number of how many Yemenis where were they captured, how many they were returned. What I know, the reports that we've read, is that 80% of those who were returned were reinserted in Al-Qaeda. These are the proportions. So that is very telling with regard the failure in re-education or in fact, de-radicalization in Yemen. And that would be, I hope, in the future, a seminar or a session on the failure of de-radicalization. Why Arab governments and us, of course, are failing in de-radicalization. I could just serve the appetizer, because we do not recognize that this is an ideology. If we do not recognize this is an ideology, what are we de-radicalizing? Well, that's a fabulous question, Claudia, and I tried to respond to this in my second book after 9/11, The War of Ideas. It is not random, and it's not basic intelligence versus basic other intelligence. It's the fact that they won so far the first war of ideas. We have not engaged in the past 8 years. You know as much as I do that we have refused to engage. Now, in this war of ideas, what I think is the most dangerous that has happened, it's not the good strategizing of the enemy. It's the fact that they were able, through certain efforts, we could expand on that another time if you want, to derail our analysis. So the problem is within our own quarters. I mean, what Al-Qaeda, the jihadists, those who are behind them, those radical quarters within the OIC, you know, this whole web that is working on a war of ideas against us, they were successful mostly because they were able to take out our capacity of seeing the threat coming. It's like we are operating without AWACS, without radars. We only stop them when they are at the airport. I mean, this is too late. If in the case of Abdul Muttalib, we didn't realize in 2005 that he was posting jihadi material online. This is where he should have been on the list, of the no-fly list. Then from that point till the time he came in, and a citizen, not a law enforcement, jumped on him and stopped him, this is very dramatic. Now, why are we not able to do so? Because we have been convinced by our experts, by our intellectual elites, most of which has been trained by academics who have been funded by petrodollars, that's the bottom line of it, that you do not touch the ideology. He could blog as much as he wants about jihad and caliphate and kill the infidel. That's freedom of thinking. If that is the case, then the jihadists are going to basically create all their resources, and it's only when they would touch us, when they will begin the operations, that we realize that they exist. So it's really there is a missing piece, a missing chip in our ability to detect them.